TV shows take a lot of time to get produced, and during their development, a common practice for writers and producers is to create what is called a series Bible, which is a reference document that compiles relevant information about the show's characters, settings, storylines, and other aspects. A lot of times series Bibles are also used as a sales pitch in order to present the concept to TV network executives so they can get a sense of the project's tone and what it's about. And recently, the series Bible for the 2003 Teen Titans animated show was uploaded onto the DC Discord server and was later shared on Reddit, and it revealed a lot of new interesting details about the early concepts they considered for the series which were previously unknown. Some of you might recall that I already made a video about some of the rejected ideas of the 2003 Teen Titans, where I mostly reported on old archived interviews from the show's staff that specifically covered the rejected ideas from the show's potential season 6. But in this video, I'm gonna talk about some rejected ideas from the very early beginnings of the Teen Titans production. So today, I'd like to make a companion piece or second part to that original video so that we can talk about this newly revealed series Bible and other topics I didn't cover in part 1. As we went over in the previous video, development on a Teen Titans animated series began after a Cartoon Network executive named Sam Register started actively pushing for the property to get adapted on the channel. And so the company began hiring writers to flesh out an early treatment and a series Bible for what the show could potentially end up becoming. One writer who was hired to make an early version of the series Bible was Peter David, a comic book writer responsible for many fantastic series and runs, such as his work on Incredible Hulk, Aquaman, and he also wrote a huge amount of the original Young Justice run from the late 90s, and he was one of the biggest creative forces behind the comic, which revitalized DC's younger teen heroes at the time and helped in solidifying the then new generation of legacy characters that had been introduced. And what's really interesting about Peter David's early series Bible for the Teen Titans cartoon is that it actually took a lot of influence from the original Young Justice comic book, while also using iconic characters from the Marv Wolfman and George Perez New Teen Titans run from the 80s. The series Bible details an origin story for the Titans that's similar to what we ended up seeing on the Season 5 episode titled Go, albeit with some notable differences. Much like in that episode, Peter David's Bible had the Titans also banding together after Starfire's arrival on Earth. But in his early version, Starfire came to Earth because of the actions of Victor Stone. The Bible describes how Victor was alone in his father's lab one night, located near Gotham City, and he sent out a signal to space in order to attract the attention of alien life forms, which served as a homing beacon for a damaged spaceship that crash lands on top of Victor, almost killing him. And out of the spaceship, Starfire emerged and escaped, leaving Victor almost dead, to be discovered by his father, Silas Stone, who managed to save the life of his son by attaching advanced cybernetic appliances onto his body, transforming him into cyborg. Starfire will begin to be tracked down by some of the Earth's teen heroes, including Robin, Beast Boy, Cyborg, and also a female hero called Secret, who in the series Bible is described as Robin's girlfriend, and she's actually a character from DC Comics who's closely associated with Young Justice. The group's very first official adventure happened in 1998's Young Justice The Secret, where Superboy, Impulse, and Tim Drake team up in order to save Secret and help her escape from a shady government organization that was conducting experiments on her, later becoming an ally and full-on member of Young Justice, and discovering that she had actually been killed by her older brother in the past, which granted her ghost-like powers. These 4 heroes would hunt down Starfire in order to stop her, but after speaking to her they realize that she's being chased by an evil alien race called the Okeg. Since Starfire was being obligated to undergo a forced marriage with the prince of their race against her wishes, and so all 5 heroes would ultimately unite to protect Earth from the looming alien invasion. This entire synopsis is really interesting, since although it does share similarities with the final origin we saw in the series, all of the characters have interesting early ideas that were discarded. Robin, for example, in the series Bible, is described as a sidekick that is desperately trying to prove to himself and to his mentor that he's fully capable as his own hero, and it takes a big focus on Robin wanting to escape from Batman's shadow as his main motivation for forming his own superhero team. And the Bible even mentions that Batman was planned to appear on the show, in a potential episode titled Never Give a Joker an Even Break, which describes how Robin would start acting younger and less assertive when Batman is around. which is something that the other Titans would notice. And given the episode's title, I think we could have even gotten to see the Joker in the Teen Titans series, which is kinda crazy. Peter David took the time to specify that Robin would be called Richard instead of Dick. You know, for kind of obvious reasons. Cyborg, as we've discussed, would have had his origin story directly tied to Starfire, and he would have some animosity towards her since he blames her for injuring him and making his father turn him into Cyborg. And it would have been interesting to see Silas Stone in the show since he never appeared on Teen Titans. Beast Boy was described as being a famous celebrity popular for being the host of an animal and nature TV show, similar to something you might see on Nat Geo. Starfire would be escaping the Okeg in the series Bible, who seemed to be a generic lizard-like alien species that Peter David came up with for the show's pitch. But in the final series, Starfire would have a more comic book accurate origin story where she was sold into slavery to the Gordanians by her evil sister Blackfire. And lastly, Peter David used Secret instead of Raven as the 5th Titan, which is a clear sign of the Young Justice influence that Peter David used for his treatment on the series. And while Secret didn't end up appearing on Teen Titans, the character was adapted onto the Young Justice animated series years later. Another very interesting detail from Peter David's Bible is that he also included descriptions for many characters he thought would make good guest appearances on the series, and many of these characters are actually teen heroes that appeared on the original Young Justice comics. Freddie Freeman, or Captain Marvel Jr., was one such character. He would have been portrayed as having a similar look to Elvis, which is fitting since the real-life Elvis Presley was a big fan of Captain Marvel Jr. comics, and he actually stole the character's look for his on-stage wardrobe. Jade and Obsidian were also considered to be guest characters in the series Bible, and if you're familiar with the comics, you'd know that these two characters are members of the Justice Society and Infinity Inc., with them actually being the lost children of Alan Scott, the original human Green Lantern. Arrowette was another character that was considered, and this is a pretty cool fact, since she was actually one of the most reoccurring characters from the Young Justice comics. She's the teenage daughter of Bonnie King, an old minor character from Green Arrow's Golden Age comics, who attempted to be a superhero before retiring, and years later, her daughter would actually be forced by her mother into adopting her old superhero persona and try to officially become the new Arrowette. And the series Bible does reference this, with Bonnie training her daughter with the hopes of her one day being able to join the Justice League. Peter David also wanted Impulse to appear on the show, who, for those of you who don't know, is actually Bart Allen, the grandson of Barry Allen from the future. And while the character didn't end up appearing on Teen Titans in the end, the show did feature Kid Flash as a guest character, although that version of the character was most likely Wally West rather than Bart Allen. Kid Eternity was also considered as a guest character. He's an old comic book character from Quality Comics, who has the power to summon any important historical figure from any time period in order to ask for their help. Hawk and Dove would have also appeared. And an interesting fact is that the character of Hawk, or Henry Hall, would have been gender bent, and he would have been adapted as a female teenager named Henrietta, who also would have had a major crush on Robin, which would have caused a sort of love square between Robin, Henrietta, Starfire, and Secret. Robbie Reed is another character that was considered. He's described as a 10-year-old who idolizes the Teen Titans, and wants to be one of them despite not having any powers or even being a teenager. In the comics, he's the star of a comic book called Dial H for Hero, where he stumbles upon a powerful device named the Hero Dial that allowed him to instantly transform into different superheroes. And in the Teen Titans series, they wanted Robbie to find a weird cell phone looking device called the Hero Hotline that could also transform Robbie into different heroes after he typed in any 4-digit number. Stargirl and Stripe were also considered as guest characters, although Courtney Whitmore would go by the name of Star Spangled Kid like the previous Golden Age version of the mantle. Peter David also wanted to use the Wonder Twins, depicting them as teen alien scientists exploring the galaxy, and their powers would have been changed from shape-shifting to simply being able to grow and shrink in size. There was even a planned episode called Beast Boy in Wonderland, where the Wonder Twins would have attempted to cure Beast Boy and get rid of his powers. Empress was another character that was considered, if she's a female hero from New Orleans who has magical powers after she was trained in the practices of voodoo by her grandmother. And the character was most likely considered since she's another character that debuted in the Young Justice comics. And the last hero that the series Bible describes was Aqualad, who ended up being the only character out of this entire list to get adapted onto the 2003 series. And if I were to guess why the other heroes didn't appear, it was most likely because of the producer's intention to have this series be stylistically closer in tone to the new Teen Titans run from the 1980s, rather than the more recent Young Justice comic that was coming out at the time. A big aspect that the show's creatives wanted to get right with the Teen Titans series was to introduce the group as their own standalone heroes that didn't have many ties to other adult characters from the larger DCU. This is why Batman never appeared in the show and was merely alluded to, or why Aquaman, Flash, and Green Arrow were never even mentioned despite the appearances of Aqualad, Kid Flash, and Speedy. And since the vast majority of characters that Peter David outlined in his series Bible were actually sidekicks, that would have gone against this aspect that the show's creatives were trying to get right. Warner Bros. And Cartoon Network would ultimately rework this early version of the series Bible with later revisions from writers like David Slack. And a sad fact about the creation of the Teen Titans cartoon is that it actually meant the end of the Young Justice comic book. In an old post from Peter David's website that he wrote on November 2002, he mentions how the Young Justice comic book was coming to an end as a decision by DC to have more company synergy with its comic book and television projects. And since a Teen Titans TV show that took inspiration from the 80s era of the team was currently being developed, DC decided to abruptly cancel Young Justice in order to create a new comic book that more closely resembled the upcoming 2003 cartoon. A title that ended up being written by Jeff Johns and illustrated by Mike McComb and Marlo Alquiza, lasting for many years afterwards. And while it is legitimately a huge shame that the start of the Teen Titans cartoon meant the end of the Young Justice comic book, the concept would later be revived for the 2010s animated series led by Greg Weisman, which was overall a success, all things considered. Moving on from the Teen Titans series Bible, now I'd like to talk about a couple of topics that I didn't discuss in my last video about the show. Some of you guys had commented asking why I didn't talk about Red X, and I honestly didn't think there's much that I could say that hasn't been said already, since there are two common theories about who Red X could be. Most people say that the second Red X we saw during Teen Titans, after Robin had used the identity, was actually another Robin, since a lot of the character's dialogue seemed to imply some connection between him and Robin. So because of this, most people believe that Jason Todd was the real identity of Red X. Even the show itself presented this possibility when Beast Boy showed aboard with different theories, and one of them was Jason Todd. In 2012, they even referenced this yet again when Red X appeared in an episode of the new Teen Titans DC Nation shorts.
Keep guessing, kids.
I still think you're Jason Todd!
The second most popular theory about who Red X is, and the one that I personally like the most, is that Red X was actually Grant Wilson, the son of Slade, a mercenary named Ravager who in the comics died during a battle against the Teen Titans, which is the motivation behind Deathstroke's hatred for the Titans in DC Comics lore. And given that both Robin and Red X seem to have very similar fighting styles and abilities during their fights, it makes you think that maybe both characters might have had similar training, which could mean that they were both characters who were trained by Batman, and that would support the idea of Jason Todd being Red X. But another interesting possibility is that they were both trained by Slade, since we already saw that Robin received training from Slade when he was manipulated into briefly working for him in Season 1. So maybe in the Teen Titans universe, Slade had also trained his oldest son in the past, who later abandoned him and ran away to become a highly skilled thief, and would end up adopting the identity of Red X. This would also be nice, since Grant Wilson is the only one of Slade's children who we don't know if they exist within the 2003 Teen Titans universe. Jericho physically appeared on the show, and Rose Wilson had some concept art made for her, since she was considered to appear on a potential Season 6. So you could argue she does technically exist within the Teen Titans universe. We know nothing about their version of Grant Wilson though, but he could have been Red X all along, and we just didn't know it. Still though, in the end, I believe that Red X's real identity mostly didn't matter since it wasn't relevant to the plot in any meaningful way. And in an old interview that Glenn Murakami had with fan website Titans Tower, which we discussed last time, he even admitted that him and the show's staff do know the real identity of Red X, but they just don't want to tell. Another topic I didn't talk about last time was Terra, specifically the last time we saw her during the last episode of the show titled Things Change. And Honestly, I always thought that that particular episode had already done a good job in portraying its themes of change and impermanence through the character of Terra as an example. I always interpreted the girl in that episode as literally being the same Terra we knew, but she was purposefully trying to move on from that identity and leave her past behind. But we weren't really meant to focus on whether the girl was Terra or not, since even if she truly was the girl that Beast Boy grew attached to and once knew as Terra, she wasn't anymore. Because, well, things change. As Murakami himself described in the Titans Tower interview, I think the thing people don't realize about Terra is she wasn't cut out to be a superhero. She had superpowers, but she wasn't cut out for that. And that's what makes her a tragic character. Terra really was the most tragic character from the entire show, which is honestly saying something considering the troubled past that other characters also had. But Terra never had a real shot at life. She never had any kind of home or community until she got a taste of what having friends felt like, and then having that taken away from you after being manipulated and tortured. That's what I personally always saw in her character, and also during Things Change. She was just trying to move on and finally get to live her life. And just in case you still question whether or not the girl truly was Terra, since in the credits for the episode she was simply listed as Schoolgirl, but in a concept art for the episode we can see that she was actually named Terra. So yeah, she was most likely Terra. Another interesting unresolved thread from that final episode is, who was that weird white alien? Well, we don't fully have that answer, but there's a 2021 article from comicbookmovie.com that discussed some potential rumored storylines and plot threads from the new Teen Titans Season 6 pitch that was made to Cartoon Network back during 2006. And I didn't talk about this article during the last video because the information reported here hasn't been really fully verified. Last time I only talked about two specific interviews with Rob Hoagie and Glenn Murakami, who were both very important writers from the series and could provide real details behind the show's production. And while this comicbookmovie.com article isn't able to be completely verified, there are some specific things that seem to have been confirmed by some writers on Twitter. The article mentions a planned storyline where the Herald would open a dimensional portal between Earth and Dimension X, causing a microscopic alien to travel to Earth and rapidly multiply, causing the creature to grow and the Titans having to stop it. Series artist Derek J. Wyatt later went on to comment about this particular part of the article, saying that the Dimension X stuff was meant to tie into the white creature we saw in Things Change. So yeah, apparently that white alien that showed up was meant to be from a place called Dimension X. One last thing that I mentioned in part 1 of this video was that, since Damian Wayne was already confirmed to appear in the DCU and more younger heroes were also likely to be introduced, it was also reasonable to think that a Teen Titans movie or show set in the DCU could happen eventually. And shortly after I published that video, Warner Bros. Discovery seemingly officially announced that they are working on a Teen Titans movie for James Gunn's DCU. So I'm not saying that I predicted it, but if someone from Warner or DC is tapped in and listening to this, I think that a Plastic Man movie would also be very successful. Oh, and you know what? Next time you guys plan on making a new show or movie about the Suicide Squad, make it about the Secret Six instead. The Secret Six are badass. That'd be nice. And there actually are some rumors that this might happen, and that'd be nice. But what do you guys think? What did you think about the early Teen Titans series Bible? What unused DC characters would you have liked to see during the show? And what would you like to see in the future Teen Titans DCU movie? What characters would you like to see in the lineup? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.